All right, y'all, we are back in the building, and I am not live today because I actually have a video and photo shoot for my book promo that's coming out. I think we've settled on a release date for March, but in the meantime, we got to discuss the Love and Marriage Huntsville season finale for season 5, depending on whatever the promo says on whatever app you're watching. Okay. On YouTube TV, it says season 5, episode 15. On something else, it could say something different. That would be my only suggestion is we need to understand what episode we watching. So just make sure that it is consistent across the different platforms. Okay. So that the people are not confused. All right. Now, with that being said, let's get into this as a season finale. To me, this was right good. This was right good. I ain't minded. I ain't minded. I mean, I kind of felt like we got all the elements we needed. We saw everybody on the cast, which is really what you want to see for a season finale. You want to have a big season finale event. You typically want to have a big season finale fight. We definitely got that. And you want to get some teases for some things that could potentially be coming up in the next season. So we got a sprinkle of that with the Sheree stuff. Oh, yes, lots of talk about Sheree this episode. Lots of talk about Sheree. Lots of talk about Sheree. Lots of talk about and discussions around Miss Ariane, although she is not named by name. We all know who are watching this show exactly who Melody and Martel be talking about when they be talking about a certain person, but they don't be saying her name. Okay. So let's get into it. I give this episode on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 because I felt like the ending satisfied my thirst. It quenched my thirst. It quenched my palate. I felt full after the meal. You know what I'm saying? I had all the elements that I needed for a season finale, and I got a glimpse of what we're going to be seeing at the reunion, and that looks like it's going to be explosively spectacular. Okay. It does. It looks really, really good. And we may talk about that in another video. But for right now, I'm going to keep this specifically focused on the episode. All right. So let's get into it. And I want you guys to also, of course, give me your ratings in the chatterization down below so that when I'm reviewing the comments, I can see what you guys had to say. Now, let's get into the tea. All right. The episode starts. Oh, the episode is called The Cold and the Beautiful. The Cold and the Beautiful. So Melody is getting a massage. Stormy comes over or whatever, and they recap the trip to Destin with, Martel and Melody and the fam and all that kind of stuff. And Melody then tells her about Martel telling her business to Miss Ariane, especially because I'm assuming that maybe Ariane may have made a reference to Melody having the panorama on social media, and maybe that's what sparked all this. I didn't happen to catch that because I think shortly after that, or sometime around that time, Melody and Martel were tearing each other up on social media. Anyway, so apparently also while they were on the phone at some point, Martel ends up accidentally calling Melody Ariane, which she's not necessarily mad about. She's more mad about Ariane going online or doing whatever she did, with that information. Now, she feels like Martel is still immature and he's bringing more mess into her life. Now, Stormy asks about seeing Martel and Sheree on social media, and Melody says she's been fielding interview questions about this left and right. She's not phased about it because, listen, she has already had to endure this man being out and about and seen with another woman, i.e., Ariane. So at this point in time, nothing is really phasing her. At least that's what she is telling us. Okay. And I think that when I also asked her during our interview, she also was like, basically, it doesn't phase her. She feels like Sheree is a beautiful woman and she's not hating on this at all. And quite honestly, I believe it. I definitely believe it. But she feels like people want them to have an issue. I don't, at least from my perspective, I feel like when something like this pops off, you know, we in the media, specifically, if we're going to be interviewing Melody and something comes out about Martel and Sheree, regardless of whether or not you want to ask her that question, if you don't ask her that question, you kind of miss an opportunity that I feel like anybody, because it's happening in real time and you have her right there, and she's and Melody's, and I will tell you just from my own experience, Melody is a very easy interview. She is going to give, and what I mean by an easy interview is there are some people that you interview and you kind of have to work for the answers. And with Melody, it's like you never have to work for the answers. I've never had a moment where she's been like, you can't ask me this. She's very open. She will answer questions. Maybe even if she doesn't want to answer them, she will answer them as positively as possible. And she gives you more than what you ask for, which always is the key to a really good interview when they give you more. And so she's also a fun interview. So I can understand why people are asking about it because obviously it's in the news. So it's going to come up. And I say that because, and I also give you guys this point about people having to ask about it because it's going to come up later when Destiny plays a clip of an interview with Melody answering a question that someone most likely asked her. And that is, again, why I'm tying these two issues, these two items together. It'll make sense when I get to the part where Destiny plays that interview. Um, she doesn't know if she's going to go to Martell's event because she feels like she can't really go and support him because they really not getting along right now. Martel and Chris Fletcher head to the event space, and for some reason, I'm wondering why Miss Melnika is not participating. Perhaps she's had enough of the shenanigans and decided she's not coming back. And so now it's Martel's cousin who is helping put on the event, and he's also invited Destiny along to, well, spread the tea at this point because Destiny wants to know what's going on with Sheree and Martel is not really trying to talk about it, although he does say that she's a good woman. Destiny asks, well, how do you feel about this? And then she proceeds to play him Melody's response to an interview question about Martel and Sheree. Now, the answer that Melody is giving in this interview sounds to me to be very similar to what she said to Stormy and also what she said during our interview. So for me, what I heard wasn't necessarily enough to incite him the way that he seemed incited by this interview. So Destiny plays the interview and her response is pretty, I mean, it's pretty tame. I mean, it's not like she went in on him, at least not in the clip that I heard, but the way he responded to it was just like he seemed very angry. Like he says that, and he mentions all the people that she has allegedly had around his kids. And then in his confessional, he mentions how great Sheree is and how he doesn't mind bringing her around his kids. And in my mind, I'm like, was there something I missed about in this interview that wasn't maybe played that he's reacting to? Because he seems to be overreacting. So unless we're missing something, I don't understand his reaction because it was very strong. And I just felt like the way he describes his relationship at this point with Sheree is that it's very in the beginning stages. So the fact that he's also very comfortable bringing her around the kids, but then also him saying that it's in the beginning stages seems a little bit contradictory to me. But I guess that goes into how soon should you introduce your kids to someone new that you were dating? I'm not a parent in that regard, so I cannot really answer that question. And I hope and pray to God that divorce is never an option for me. So hopefully would never have to be in that situation. But what I'm saying is, can you guys tell me what you think the appropriate amount of time for somebody that you are dating to meet your kids is? Because I can't make a judgment on that because I don't feel like because I don't have kids, I ain't in that situation. But for those of you guys who do, I would love to know your thoughts and opinions about it. Meanwhile, um, Destiny asked, well, why didn't you tell Melody about, you and Sheree before it hit social media. And he says that it's not her business and they can barely co-parent. So that's why he didn't talk to her about it. So Leticia is prepping for the wine tasting event celebration that Martel is having for his Ines wine. She's picking out her attire, and they're at home. It's her and Marceau, and it's the first time that everybody will be getting together since the Madani event. So Marceau fully expects the girls to get together and argue. Okay. Leticia thinks that the girls are fine right now, so that's not going to happen. And so they do plan on carrying the honest wine in um in the black, but they let us know in their confessional that honest is no competition for chocolate in a bottle. No, absolutely not. Chocolate in a bottle is about black excellence. And our nest is about wine down Wednesday. Oh, yes, they did throw some shade. They did throw a little bit of shade. Okay. They did sprinkle a little bit of chocolate in a bottle on Martell's Miss Ines wine. Okay. So but they gonna carry it. So they gonna support it, but they just let us know it ain't on the level, according to them. Anyway, they talk about Sheree confirming online that she and Martel are dating and how Melody did interviews saying she was unbothered. And Leticia thinks that Melody doesn't really show her true feelings. Now, I think that Leticia and Marceau commenting on Melody and her true feelings and whether or not she is bothered or unbothered, I think that it is not going to play out well for them with regards to potentially her reaction. And I know that she was going to be live tweeting tonight for the episode. So I just wanted to see some of the things that she may have said. Um, and let's actually go to the tweets since we talking about it while I'm looking, because I'm just doing this real time and it's just gonna see what she had to say. Um, a lot of this is about the reunion. A lot of this is about Martell and her. She tweeted something that somebody said Melville. They talking about Melody Holt every other scene. Child. I'm trying to see. Ooh, she says, "What's your storyline? Somebody help him, please." Okay, so here it is. She says, "Girl, you don't even know my feelings because you ain't even in my life for real." So I figured she would be saying something in response to what um Leticia and Marceau had to say about her, whether or not she was showing her true feelings. And then Marceau says that he basically believes that somebody who acts unbothered really actually cares about, those things that they are saying doesn't bother them. But in my mind, I'm like, I guess when his thought process was, well, you wouldn't react to something if it didn't bother you. But I'm like, if you're asked about it in an interview, you got to answer the question. So it's like there's no way around it. And to be quite honest with you, I kind of feel like, again, like I said earlier, if you are sitting there in an interview with Melody and there's some news breaking about Martel and Sheree, obviously you're gonna get her to weigh in on it or get her at least her thoughts about it, because that's usually what people will do. So anyway, Marceau also says that he thinks that Sheree is a level up for Martel, and that Melody probably was happier when she thought he was leveling down, basically indicating that Ariane was the level down. But it must be a gut punch now that he's allegedly leveling up with Sheree. I was like, when that was very loaded right there, baby. That was loaded. Anyway, it's time for the Honest event, and everybody arrives. Stormy, Tiffany, Leticia, and Destiny all get together. And Leticia wonders if Melody will show up. Tiffany reveals to the group that Melody told them, Stormy and Tiffany, that Destiny invited her over. So Tiffany wants to know if they're good and if they're hanging out, being messy, of course, because she gotta know that they still not on a good page. So Destiny says no, they just agreed to disagree. And then Leticia says that's adult-ish. And Tiffany asks, well, were y'all faking being at a good place at the peace party? And Destiny says the only person that she was annoyed with at the peace party was Tiffany. Stormy's like, well, what did Tiffany do? And Destiny's like, Tiffany just does her little Tiffany thing. And Destiny feels like Tiffany doesn't know how to read the room, but she's consistent at making things awkward. I will admit that Tiffany does consistently make things awkward for Destiny, okay? Meanwhile, here's something that confused me. Y'all let me know if it confused you, because I'm trying to figure it out. Chris Fletcher has this thing with Marceau, and I'm assuming it is because, as you guys stated and reminded me last week, that he also had faced some issues with infidelity. Okay. And so he wanted to clear his name, is what it seemed like, right? So he confronts Marceau at the Honest event, and he says he's been getting heat about this Atlanta trip. And I'm like, well, why? And so Marceau reveals that he said he was with a friend because they were coming at him about being there with another woman. So we get the flashback and him saying that he went with a friend. No, he met a friend in Atlanta. Then it was he and this friend went out to dinner, and Leticia asked who. He said, me and Chris Fletcher. Now, previously in last week's episode, Chris Fletcher told us that he and Marceau only went to go look at a property, and he was only with Marceau from about 2 to 4. So in this week's episode, we see the flashback with Marceau telling Leticia, excuse me, that they went to dinner. So I'm like, which is it? Did y'all go to dinner? Did y'all go to the property then dinner? And then Chris left that out? Because the other thing about this whole situation is interesting is that Chris said he was in Atlanta with his wife. So here's how it went. In real time, Marceau says they're going to talk about him regardless. But in his confessional, he basically says, Chris could have just given I'm paraphrasing what he said. He said Chris could have just given a general account of the truth without any extra details. But I'm like, why do you want him to leave out any extra details? Like, clearly Chris is being prompted to address this situation. I don't know why, because if the wife was there, then what does it matter? I guess that's the question that I have, unless the wife is piping up and saying like, no, you need to tell the truth, okay, about this situation, because he got you caught out here looking like you was with him and you wasn't, and she need to know. Is that what's happening here? And then Marceau says he said what he said to Leticia in the way that he built his answer was drawn out for suspense because it's none of their dang business. But in my mind, I'm like, but it was your wife who was asking. It was your mother-in-law who brought it up. And it was your wife who was sitting in the car with you asking. So if you dragging it out for somebody, I mean, yeah, you could be dragging it out for the cameras for dramatic effect, but ultimately you dragging it out and it's your wife asking you. So that was all confusing to me. I'm trying to understand what the real story is with this Atlanta trip and why it is so difficult to point out the chronological order of how things occurred during that period of time and why the details seem so murky. I just don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't understand the motivations behind keeping the situation murky. I don't understand clearly the motivations behind Chris having such an issue with it, because we're not really getting Chris's full story because he doesn't get a confessional. So I'm just trying to figure out if you guys know, and if you do, let me know, because right now I am confusion. Okay. Now, then Chris says on that day he was in Atlanta with his wife when he met Marceau. But I'm like, was your wife with you when you met Marceau, or was your wife just in Atlanta when you met Marceau and you stepped away from her for a bit to meet up with Marceau? And now it's looking kind of strange because the wife maybe didn't know where you were when you met up with Marceau. I'm just confused. So again, Marceau now feels like this matter is not settled with Chris because Chris doesn't know how to answer questions without bias. And I'm like, what does that mean? Can somebody tell me in the chat? I don't get it. I got questions and I don't seem to be getting any answers for this situation because it's not clear. Anyway, Martel rolls up, but back over at the girls, it's Leticia, Tiffany, and Stormy, and they wonder if Melody is coming. And I'm curious as to why. I mean, I listen, I get it, it's a plot line, but I kind of feel like, why is everybody so concerned about whether or not Melody's coming? I think it was pretty clear at that dinner that she probably wasn't. But anyway, I guess it makes for good conversation and for good TV. So anyway, Stormy says she tried to invite Melody, but they really want to know if Sheree is coming. So apparently, Martel and Sheree decided that it would be best if she not attend because there would be more focus on the two of them dating than the wine. And I'm like, how, Sway? How does that make sense? Typically, you want your event to be a splash and to be memorable, and Sheree would definitely have made it memorable. How about this? You probably would, it was a situation where probably Bravo had not signed off on allowing Sheree to uh, uh, be shown on Love and Marriage Huntsville on a different network at this point in time. Okay. That's probably the case, specifically because this event was being filmed at the end of the season, and Atlanta was about to be gearing up to be filming their next season, or and with also the reunion airing at the same time, that this season was about to start airing or had already started airing. So it's kind of like, I think that that was probably more likely the case, that the contracts probably wouldn't have been worked out at that point in time. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. But I could be wrong. I could be speculating in the wrong direction because in my mind, at the end of the day, you want your event to be memorable. And a Sheree walking up in her She by Sheree fashions would definitely make the event a memorable one and still talked about beyond what we're going to talk about it today. Okay. So meanwhile, Kimmy and Maurice arrive, and it's time for Martel to make his speech, which he apparently wrote over the course of a couple of days, and which he still fumbled over when he first started. But nonetheless, I'm gonna chalk it up to nerves, and he pulls through, and he actually, talks about his grandmother this time, and really makes a big deal about calling out the family members and things like that, because he didn't do so well on that last time, probably because he was his judgment was cloudy and confused by all the women's in the room. Okay. Anyway, afterwards, the group convenes inside, and it's Maurice, Kimmy, Destiny, Stormy, and Courtney. And basically, Kimmy tells, Stormy and Courtney about her diagnosis. It seemed to me as though maybe Destiny already knew about it, but it's a nice moment where they really do hash out like the who, what, and whys and hows of everything that Kimmy is going through. And, Destiny at this point just wants to be there for Kimmy. It really is a nice moment. Outside, Marceau catches up with Jalen, who is Kimmy's son. And, their conversation is also really good and it's really deep. And what I love on this show is seeing the men express emotion. And we see tears, and we see two men like embrace and hold each other up and lift each other up. And I think that is an amazing thing to see because we don't see enough of it. And I got to tell y'all the truth. Marceau, to me, every time he has a conversation that is a real conversation, especially ever since this whole Kimmy situation has come up, I think he levels up in my mind every single time he has a conversation, because he really does talk about and he doesn't specify men, but he talks about people in general opening up and allowing themselves to feel whatever it is that they feel in those moments that they feel like they need to get their emotions out. And I love when men are able to talk freely about emotion, and it's no big deal. It's not a sign of weakness. And I just think that in some regards, maybe we've seen or are seeing Marceau evolve right before our very eyes. And I just think it's just amazing to see. And again, like I said, he does level up in my mind every time he has these one of these conversations. And I have to say, as a reality TV personality, I've really grown to respect his place on this show, even though sometimes he confuses the heck out of me. Okay. Um, Martel wants to talk to Melody about the kids. It's another day. Melody did not come to the event. Okay. And I don't know if maybe she felt like he was there for some other reason because she seemed genuinely confused about what the nature of their conversation was going to be. But it seemed like when she realized what it was, she was like, "You're not coming in here to talk about this." And he's like, "You need to let me up in the house." And I'm like, I mean, listen, I understand. And I know some people gonna feel a certain type of way about this, but listen, I feel like this. I don't want to let everybody up in my house. Okay. Now, sometimes you got to let the repair people in, you got to let the cleaning people in. But ultimately, in terms of stopping by to visit, if I don't like your energy, I don't want your energy being left as a specter of you in my home. Okay. And to be quite frank with you, I don't think there's anything wrong with her not wanting him in her home. Now, whatever her reasons are for it are her reasons, but in just I can relate to it based on an energy thing. To me, it's about energy and what type of energy I want in my space. Okay. And it's just really that simple to me. That's why I don't really want to have like a whole bunch of parties. I don't want a whole bunch of people up in my house, in my personal space, and then they leave their energies be lingering and around and stuff like that. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! That's not what we're gonna do. And so, anyway, he's upset about that. They get into it, and you know, he's still trying to get into the house. And then he says he's gonna leave, and she needs to invite him inside. So she closes the door. She's never gonna let him into her house because she ain't never let him in before. He goes to the car and he starts to calling her, and then she goes outside to see if he wants the bag, and he says he don't need the bag. He drives off. She calls him back. He tells her not to be disrespectful. Basically, he would let her into his house. Why can't he come into her house? It was just like, I mean, if y'all don't have this conversation in the front yard, y'all better. Okay. I mean, let's get to whatever we need to get to, because this all this inside outside is not really what's bubbling underneath the surface. Let's get to the real tea. The real tea is she's annoyed because of the situation with Ariane. Point blank and the period. Okay. She's annoyed by that. Now, he apparently ends up telling Ariane that she had the panorama because I guess the kids were maybe going to be commingling. And so he didn't think that by telling her that about Melody's diagnosis that she would go online and do what she did. I can understand maybe his rationale for doing so, but I can also understand why she's annoyed that he did that. And I think that it really goes into the maturity of the person that he is dealing with. Now, I'm not calling Miss Ariane immature, but what I will say is to go on social media and then talk about somebody else's having the panorama, if that is what happened, because I didn't see it for myself, I can only go by what's inferred. It would seem to me that that was a little young-minded thing to do. You know what I'm saying? So I can understand why she feels like he's bringing her drama. And so that conversation basically devolves into, you know, um, him telling her, well, it's because of you that I've caught the panorama so many times because you be running back and forth to Atlanta. I've had to quarantine 3 times and caught the panorama because of you. Okay. Then they go into whether or not he's been still trying to get with her. According to Melody, he was still talking about them being soulmates just the other Monday ago, last Monday. Okay. So I'm assuming though that last Monday, him and Sheree was doing the photo shoot. So Sheree, let me just say this. Read the tea leaves. Read the tea leaves. Watch the show. Because ultimately, if this is a real situation, then you need to be mindful of how he reacts and relates to the other women that are already in his life. Okay. And you need to let that be a marker for you for how he may treat you at a certain point if you, okay, get on his bad side. Because what he also tells Melody is this. He's like, I don't want you. I know too much about them, all the men that you've been with to ever want you. And I'm thinking to myself, the nature of their argument had not gotten to that level of low. And so it just seemed to me at that point like he was just kind of taking jabs at her to hurt her feelings in the same way that maybe perhaps his feelings were hurt. Ultimately, he ends up driving off because she walks off because she's determined that she is not going to allow this negative energy in her life and in her space any longer. Okay. And so we end it with that, and we get an very, very interesting trailer for the reunion. And I cannot wait for that. It's all types of accusations floating around. So this is about to be lit. Let me know what you guys thought about this episode in the chatterization down below. I'm interested in hearing about it. And we will catch you all in the next video.